fucking quagmire of American healthcare.
Yeah.
So
Is it better in Spain? Because you lived there for a while, right?
yeah, it's way better in Spain. I mean, yeah. Um, yeah, you have, first of all, it's, free in the sense, not free, but it's,
Yeah.
you don't pay for services. Um, and doctors don't make that much money in Spain. So people who go into medicine do it for love of medicine and their fellow man, as opposed to a way to make a shit ton of money. So the motivations are different.
Yeah. It seems like we have more of a sick care system than a healthcare system in this country, which is, I don't know, like I try to have these discussions on my podcast and try to kind of like wake people up to that, but I feel like people don't want to hear it.
Yeah, yeah. The whole sort of America's number one narrative is extremely difficult to break through for people who haven't lived elsewhere or even really traveled much. It's frustrating.
Well,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, it's like we just value different things. I think we value money. And it's like you said, like the people that are becoming doctors in America, it's like they want to make money. Well, how are you going to make money as a doctor? Like, you're not going to make money if you tell somebody to eat healthy and exercise and get sunlight. You're going to make
Yeah.
money by prescribing them medications or giving them surgeries, or all, so that's where all the money is.
Yeah,
In
well, and the insurance is set up the same way.
yeah,
Insurance will pay for the meds and the surgery, but it won't pay for, a therapist to talk about why you're so stressed out that you have to drink so much, or you know what I mean?
right.
Yeah, the incentives are all wrong. In Spain, because the government's paying for the healthcare, a lot of money goes into preventive measures.
That's what
So,
I love. I think we should do way more of that.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Is this
Well,
okay? I'm recording this part. I mean, is this okay?
oh, okay. All right.
Is that okay? Or we can cut that out if you want.
I told you I wouldn't talk about healthcare.
No, it's so weird because I feel like I know you because I've listened to so many episodes. I listened to a bunch of your episodes on Rogan, and then I listened to both your books. So I'm like, I feel like I know you, but you have no idea who I am. So it's it's kind of a
Well,
weird spot to put you in, I guess.
I watched a couple episodes
Did
when
you?
you
Okay.
contacted me. Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Thank you.
Well, because normally I don't do other podcasts. I'm so busy
Really?
doing my own. Yeah, I mean, I'll do a friend's podcast or something like that. But I probably do one out of every maybe 20 invitations or whatever. But I watched your podcast and I was like, wow, this guy really gets into it. Like you seems like you've read your guest books when they have books and you're aware of who they are. And I know how hard that is doing a weekly podcast myself. It's very hard to find time for all that kind of, research. But
Yeah.
you seem to take it very seriously. So
Yeah,
I
well,
thought,
I make it a priority, but I also just I find people so fascinating. And I read, speed read both of your books on Audible, and they were fascinating books. And then I listened to a bunch of your episodes on Rogan. I have only listened a little bit of your tangentially. Did I say that right?
tangentially speaking. Yeah.
Tangentially speaking, yeah, you've had some amazing guests. I need to dive into that more too. But just your episodes with you and Rogan is like, it's like freaking like Lennon McCartney or so. Like you guys make such beautiful, like he'll bring up all these fascinating things and then you'll bring up all these fascinating things. And I'm on the edge of my seat. Like, wow, like what are you guys going to talk about next? Like, I just want to hear it. It's like so amazing.
Yeah, yeah, we've had very different lives, very different perspectives on things. It was fun too because, back in the day I lived in Topanga Canyon,
Yeah.
just north of LA, and his studio was right down in the valley, like 20 minutes from my house. So, we used to, if he had a guest who had to bail for some reason or something,
Oh,
he'd give me a call and be like, dude, I'm recording in an hour and so couldn't make it. What are you doing? I'd be like, yeah, sure, I'll come down. So a lot of that stuff was, just so easy and spontaneous. Um, so yeah, it was really fun. But, people write to me and be like, when are you going on Rogan? What's going on? You guys have a beef? Everybody, all these kind of young men think everything is a beef. It's like, no, dude, I live in Colorado. He lives in Austin. It's not a 20-minute, drive down to his place, like it used to be.
oh, that's okay. Yeah, I wondered that because I was like, Oh, I feel like you haven't been on there in a while, but you were going like it was like every year at least once, and I've been trying to. I think I listened like five, and I was like, and it's so funny because one of them was like, it's to go back in time and listen to old episodes when things were like current then, like in 2015 of what was going on in the world, and to like listen to your reactions then. It's really fascinating to hear that
Yeah.
like in real
Yeah.
time.
Well, you're going to be doing it with your own podcast someday. It's like, I guess I've never gotten around to listening to my own episodes. It's weird. I've been doing this for 12 years. And sometimes someone will discover the podcast and they'll write to me and they say like, dude, I heard you, whatever, somewhere. And I went and I started at the beginning. And so
Wow.
they're like listening from 2012, 2013, 2014. And it's such a weird thing because it's like they're more in touch with who I was
Hmm.
8 years ago than I am. Like they would,
Right.
what did you think of X? They would probably know better than I do because I don't fucking remember. I
Yeah.
don't know.
No, it's just
Uh,
funny. Yeah, like you were, because Rogan was saying something about how men can have abortions, and like, and just because now that's something that we talk about. It's like it's very, it's debatable whatever side you're on, but it's something that's talked about. But at the time, it's like 2015. Just the look on your face, you're like, I don't follow you.
yeah.
I'm cracking up. I'm like, oh, this is 2015. This was before this was like even a thing that people talked about. And so I don't know, it's really, you guys had some really fascinating discussion. I'm glad you guys are both cool, and that's good. I'm like middle child. I always want everyone to be peaceful together. So I thought,
Yeah.
did they have a falling out? I thought that too. Yeah. I'm like one of the bros or whatever, like you said.
No, no. As far as I know, we never had a falling out. Life happens, things change, and also, I don't know. I feel like there are relationships that sort of have a built-in expiration date, like you kind of talk about what you have to talk about, and then it's like that's kind of it. Like I don't know how much more he wants to talk about, prehistoric sexuality, or, how many more times we're going to go around the track of progress is real or it's an illusion. And, like we've sort of argued our positions, and it's not really worth flying to Austin to do it again. I don't
Really?
think.
Because I thought it was so fascinating that you guys touched on so many different things, and it would go from super deep issues like I listened to one where you're talking about like you had a really interesting point about the makeup of people, how we are made up of other organisms. And so then that's what like
Mhm.
people in a community, it's like we're part of something else. Like even us as ourselves, though, is not just one thing. We're made up of all these other organisms. I was like, wow, this is just so fascinating. You guys would both bring up such interesting things about see, it's interesting because I reached out because I thought you're a psychologist, which you are, but I feel like when I listen to the conversations, you're almost more of a sociologist, anthropologist.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm a psychologist in the sense that I have a PhD in psychology, but it's not clinical. It's a research-based PhD. So, like, I'm not someone you would go to talk about your relationship with your mother necessarily.
Right.
Um,
But do you feel like those topics interest you more, like the different, because I feel like when your book too, like you talk a lot about different societies, tribes, and things like it's more, isn't that kind of more sociology and anthropology?
yeah, yeah. I would say I would describe myself more in terms of anthropology, primatology. Um,
Right.
like I know way more about primate testicles than I ever thought I would.
Right. That is meant, I think that's in both of your books. Which I think one of the, you talk about chimps, and then what is the other thing? But bonitos, or is it
But bonobos.
bonobos? Sorry. Yeah. But you've mentioned that like several
I
times.
love bonitos though. That's great.
I just fucked it up. Like,
Mexican bonobos.
yeah, bonobos. Yeah, that I was like, I don't think I've ever heard that term before. I definitely had not heard it that much until I listened to your books, and I was like, okay, because you said we're way closer to them than we are traditional chimpanzees or gorillas.
Well, that's debatable. I mean, in terms of DNA, we're equidistant. So to get a little bit technical, our evolutionary line diverged from the line that led to chimps and bonobos 5 to 6 million years ago. And then their line split about 3 million years ago based on DNA drift, genetic drift. That's a way of measuring, when species sort of split off from a common ancestor. So the way to think of it is, chimps and bonobos are like my twin brothers. They're twins, right? And then I'm their older brother. So I'm very closely related to both of them, equidistant, and they're more closely related to one another than they are to me.
Right. And then they're, I forget, the bonobos are more non-monogamous, right? Was that what it was in the book?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean they're both non-monogamous, but the main difference in terms of sexuality is that bonobos are more promiscuous than chimps. Chimps do have sex when the female's not ovulating, and that's very rare among mammals. There's just a handful of mammals that do that. Bonobos have sex throughout the female cycle. Bonobos have sex face to face, which is unheard of in mammals, except for us and bonobos. Um, there's a lot of same-sex interaction with bonobos, female, female, male, male. You don't see a lot of that with chimpanzees. Female bonobos will let other bonobos hold their infants, which chimps will never do because they're afraid. I mean, chimps will kill the infants, male chimps especially. And there's a lot of violence inherent in chimpanzee society. So rape and murder and infanticide and organized group conflict, which we anthropomorphize and call war. None of those things have been witnessed in bonobos. There's never been in the wild, in captivity, no one has ever seen a bonobo kill or rape another bonobo.
Hmm.
So
We're
the
worse in some
great,
ways then.
what's that?
We're worse in some ways than.
Yeah, in some ways. I mean, we have a lot in common with them, as I outlined. And then the question is, are we more closely related to bonobos or chimps, or do we contain both? Are they like the sort of the bad and the good angel on our shoulders, whispering into our ears? It's an interesting situation how the biology kind of reflects in some ways philosophical issues in humans. Um, but I argue that humans are more closely related to bonobos behaviorally and spiritually, if that's even a legitimate way to talk about this, because trauma uh, hurts us. It hurts us to see another human being hurt. Dentists, tattoo artists, people who are regularly in the presence of someone else's suffering have very high suicide and depression rates. It's hard for us to be in the presence of someone who's in pain without feeling it ourselves. That's not something that is witnessed in chimpanzees. Chimpanzees are, without compassion. So Franz de Waal, who's a great primatologist who studied bonobos and chimps and just died a few months ago, he famously said that chimps use violence to get sex, whereas bonobos use sex to avoid violence.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah. It does seem like most humans are like what you're saying, but have you read that book? I think, is it The Sociopath? I always mix up sociopath and psychopath, but I think it might be called The Psychopath Next Door. And she talks about how I think it's like 1 in 5 people is basically like a sociopath. And not meaning that they're going to be a serial killer, but just necessarily they just don't have that kind of empathy for other people, or just don't really feel. And there's a lot of careers that serve them well for that, like being a surgeon. If you think about, you couldn't be a surgeon and have people die, like you go home and have a breakdown but if you just have that cut off sociopath kind of brain, you can do that no problem, and it's not a big deal.
Yeah, I haven't read that book. I'm familiar with the research. Wall Street seems to have a lot of sociopaths as
Yeah,
well.
for sure.
Yeah,
There's so many, like anybody, a lot of the people in the military. I mean, obviously the ones that are not are all these people that have PTSD and that are, that aren't meant. And I would be terrible in the army. I'm sure that I don't want to kill another person, but there's a lot of people that it's like no big deal for them, it seems like.
Yeah, these are interesting questions, and for me, it's very interesting to think about them in terms of evolutionary pressures, right? So in a hunter-gatherer society, someone who lacks compassion would be at a disadvantage because you're in a small-scale society, everyone knows each other. If you talk shit about someone behind their back, or you hoard food and don't share, you're not generous, any of these sort of antisocial behaviors, everyone's going to see them, and you're going to be ostracized, if not killed. The hunter-gatherer societies are extreme. They're known as fierce egalitarians by anthropologists. And they have all these mechanisms for enforcing pro-social behavior. So someone who doesn't get that and doesn't feel a sort of natural inclination toward sharing and taking care of other people is going to have a big problem and probably not reproduce as successfully as those who do display those behaviors, right? But then with the shift to agriculture and hierarchical political systems and armies and invasions and all this violence and all that, suddenly if you're in ancient Rome and you have the capacity to kill people without feeling anything, you have an advantage now. You rise up in the hierarchy. You're going to have more sex and more offspring and more money and more reproductive success. So it's interesting, these kind of qualities that we're talking about as, aspects of human nature, different societies nourish them or limit them. And we happen to live in a society that nourishes some pretty antisocial behavior.
Yeah, and I think it's sometimes too, it's like people are kind of a little bit of both. Like the surgeon I'm discussing, like a surgeon who they could, somebody could die on their table and they'll be like, well, I did everything I could. But then they could also be a very caring and, generous person to their family or to their wife or whatever. But it's just like they have like, there's a switch that's in them that they can turn on and off. Like I don't have that switch. Like I just have, I care about people. I care about everybody, even people I don't know, even people that hate me for some reason, which maybe that's a flaw. I don't know, but I care about them, So it is interesting though. You're right though. Yeah. If the people that don't really give a shit and care more about power, money or whatever, like they can do very well in America. And then they're even regarded very highly by a lot of people. Like they're like, wow, that guy's driving a Lamborghini. He must be an amazing person.
Yeah. Not to get into politics, but I mean, we've got a guy here who claims to be a billionaire whose wife clearly hates him, whose
Does
sons
she?
are.
Is the wife? Hey, is that why she's never like in doesn't come out to events or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, we could go on and on. The examples of extremely unhealthy, unhappy, fucked up people that either become icons in American society or get unhealthy and fucked up by being icons, right? Like Elvis or Michael Jackson, Michael Jordan. Like,
What
did
about
you
all
watch?
like the gangsters? Isn't that's a weird thing? If you think about it, we like look up to like Billy the Kid, the guy was a criminal. And he's
Yeah,
like revered as a hero, or like Al Capone, these gangsters, like we're like, well, that guy's so like we love him. We love like the
Snoop
mob and
Dogg.
stuff. Yeah,
Apparently, Snoop was a gangster, right?
but
Like,
Snoop never really killed anybody, did he? Or wasn't he just into smoking weed and having orgies and stuff? It's more
I don't,
peaceful.
I don't know. He seems peaceful now. Yeah. From what I heard, he was like a Crip or a Blood or something back in the day. I don't know.
Right. Yeah. But yeah, so it's like it's a weird society when you think about some of these things, when you actually like get down, like we don't, I mean, other than like Mother Teresa, like, is there a lot of people that are very generous, that share a lot, that devote their life to helping people that are revered and famous and looked up to? Like we don't even talk about those people.
Well, apparently Mother Teresa was a bitch too, according
Oh,
to
really?
Christoper Hitchens. Yeah.
See, this is the fascinating shit. I love that you pull out. You know all this crazy stuff. I didn't.
Yeah.
So she was not
Well,
good.
Christopher Hitchens wrote a whole book about her, like
Really?
debunking. Yeah. But as far as like, yeah, do we revere people who are healthy and generous? I think it's interesting that fame, you know, the thing is, someone who's like politics, take an example, hunter-gatherer society, you become a leader because other people ask you your opinion on things. People look at you and like, oh, you know what? Chuck was right last time about where we should go. Chuck made a good decision. Chuck's a nice guy. He's really generous. He shares everything. He helps people when they're sick. Let's ask Chuck's opinion because he's wise, right? It's not because you stand up and say, I am the leader. Everyone needs to follow me. I'm so fucking awesome. Trust me. Like it's the opposite of what we have now. Ego or any kind of inclination to be a leader immediately disqualifies you in a hunter-gatherer society because people think you're ridiculous. If you're walking around saying, I know, I'm so fucking smart, they're just like, oh, fucking Chuck's full of shit. And it's kind of like the way things operate on small scale, like among a group of friends. If somebody gets too big for their britches and is always telling everybody else what to do, they stop getting invited to the party, right? You rise to leadership among a group of friends because people respect you, because you have a track record of being cool and smart and making good decisions. So on a large scale, like American political system, everything's the opposite of the way it works in hunter-gatherer societies. So we end up with these very unhealthy people rising to the top of the political system, the economic system, entertainment, because they need it, because there's some flaw in them that they need the attention, they need the power, they need the money. Whereas people who are healthy, you don't hear about them because they're at home having a good time. They don't need millions of dollars. $1 million. Who needs more than $1 million? I mean, come on. So they get $1 million and they say, I'm done. I'm good. I got my house. I got my woman. I got, kids are cool. We got food. Nobody's going to be hungry. We're good. I'm out. We don't hear about them. We hear about the ones that keep going and going and going because they never have enough.
Right. It's like this numbers game kind of thing where it's like who's got the most, but not who gives the most. It's who keeps the most.
Yeah, exactly. Everything's distorted. Yeah, there's a great anthropologist, Marvin Harris, who wrote some great books. Cannibals and Kings is a pretty popular one. And he talks about the big man social organization, which was very prevalent in the South Pacific and different parts of Asia thousands of years ago. And that was exactly what you just said. Someone accrued power and prestige by giving away as much as possible. So the sort of first contact, the missionaries and the explorers who came across these societies would often be very confused because they'd come to a village and they want to like talk to the leader, which is already a complicated thing because leadership structures are different in these societies. But generally, it was the person with the smallest hut, with the least amount of possessions, with the shittiest clothing and all that. And they're like, wait a minute, he's the leader. He looks like the poorest guy here. Like, yeah, because he gives away more than anyone else. That's why we love him. So it's a very backwards kind of, everything's upside down and inside out.
That's interesting. Do you think part of it too is like, because I'm really into learning new things, and like, so part of it would, for me, would be like a mentoring thing. Like that's who I would look up to, as someone who could show me how to do it. Like how did they get so much in the first place? Like if they could show me how or show me a skill. Like I'm not really into learning new things, and I feel like that kind of helps us like develop a purpose too, because like otherwise, like what I feel like that's what I struggle with lately as I get older into my 40s. Like in my 20s, I didn't give a shit, but now I'm like, what is the point of our lives? Like, why are we here? What I feel like it's to help other people in some way, whether that's teaching them a skill or having these kinds of conversations on a podcast or sharing something with the world, right?
Yeah, could be the world. I mean, or just a tiny little piece of the world. But yeah, I feel like when I think, I mean, I'm 62, so I've been sort of thinking of those post 40 issues for a while now. And I think a big part of happiness is not inflating your expectations, which is runs counter to what our particular society tells us. I think most of the keys to happiness are having a very skeptical eye to what your society is teaching you, because we live, in my opinion, as well, having read Civilized to death, I think we live in an extremely pathological society. So to be a healthy person in a pathological society, you're always swimming upstream. You're always out of step, with the general public. But yeah, I look at the rule of diminishing returns, for example. If you have one car that works and it's reliable and it's comfortable, are you going to be twice as happy if you have two of those cars? What if you have 10 of those cars? Are you going to be 10 times as happy? Like, no, you're going to have 10 times as many insurance payments and maintenance and all this. And you can only really use one fucking car. So what's the point? And
Right.
if you look at society in the Western world, so much of it is like that, right? You got to drink Cristal. Like, do I $300 a bottle or whatever the fuck it is? Like, really? Could I just have a beer? Am I a bad guy if I just like a beer? Like, this whole sort of, you need to have the most expensive tastes and you need to be very difficult to please. Like, that's a sign of sophistication. I don't think so. I think that's a sign that you're a sucker and that you've, taken the bait and you're going to spend all your time and energy trying to impress other people who don't give a fuck about you anyway. Like, it's a total scam.
Oh yeah, it's like, have you ever seen that like YouTube thing where they set up this Italian shoe store, Pedlesi, and all these people are coming in and they're buying these $500 shoes, and then they come and they say, actually, this is just Payless, and we just changed the name to Palesi and made all this like fancy stuff inside to make it look cool, but these are like $20 shoes, and
Yeah.
people were paying and they thought it was so cool. That's like, I feel like that's a lot of that shit, because I've stayed at like really nice hotels and I've stayed at like Motel 6, bottom of the barrel, like Fleabag motels. There's not that big of a difference, right? I mean,
You're unconscious. You're literally unconscious most of the time you're there.
right. As long as it's got a bed and a toilet and a sink and I don't even think you need a TV now because everyone's got a cell phone, so you can watch stuff on your phone or whatever. And
Yeah.
it's like the same with like restaurants. I've eaten like I don't really like fancy my girlfriend and I talk about this all the time. We're like, we don't really like fancy restaurants. Like, and I've eaten at like some of the best food I've had is like these like dive Mexican places that make amazing tacos. Like guys on a street, what do you call that? Like the pastor where they shave it off. You ever had that? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like,
Al
oh, it's so
pastor.
good. Maybe too,
Yeah.
because you're on the beach in Mexico. I don't know. But
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes I think a lot of that stuff is overrated. I think you used an example when you were talking to Rogan about like Rolex watch. Like, is it really that much better of a watch, or is it you're just paying for the name? And it's like, that's so much more. It's like, what is it, like 50 grand for a Rolex or something?
Yeah, they're all different models. I think I might have pissed him off. I think he's got a few Rolex watches.
Oh, shit. Well, some people are really into like cars or watches or what, like some people that it's like a more of a hobby, I guess. I don't know. Like guitars. What I had Joe
Yeah.
Bonamassa on, really famous guitar player, has a huge guitar collection. He loves guitars. Like, so I mean, that's kind of different though, I think. I guess it's more of like a hobby.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure to someone like that, every guitar has a different sound and different feel. And, so if that's your life, then great.
Yeah.
Great.
The one thing I would say,
But having said that, sometimes I'll see these YouTube videos of a little kid in Africa who's got a stick and a bucket on the bottom and four strings, and he's killing. And it's like, okay, talent is talent. You don't need 20 guitars to be a great musician. These people have it inside them. So it's cool. If you can afford it, it's cool. But don't make the mistake that many people do of saying, well, if I'm going to learn guitar, I need to get a $500 guitar or $1,000 guitar. No, dude, just do it. It's like joining the gym. You don't need to join the fucking gym. Just go for a run.
right. I think that one thing, like, because you've traveled a lot, like that's the one thing that I think if I ever did have a lot of money, that I think that would be different is flying like a private jet versus commercial, because I just absolutely hate flying commercial. Maybe first class is like different. I don't know. I just hate flying commercial, but I love to travel, and that would be the one thing that I would think would be really cool about being like mega rich, is that like you wouldn't have to fly with all the cattle, you know, like it's.
Yeah.
Have you ever
Yeah.
flown in private? You've probably flown in private jets, I'm guessing, just because of the people you hang out with, or no?
Yeah, I have. I've flown business class, the whole gamut. I've also been, in the absolute shittiest shithole in the bottom of a ferry in Indonesia with no windows and human shit washing back and forth as the boat rocked. I've experienced the whole spectrum of of comfort and discomfort.
So is
Yeah.
that something though that is versus like a nicer hotel versus a dirt bag hotel? It's really to me, I don't think it's that big of a difference. But I feel like with travel, it because it gets kind of scary when you're in these like tight places. I don't know.
Yeah, I think air travel is one of the areas where there's a big difference, but that's all artificial pricing and all that. The rule of diminishing returns doesn't say there's no difference between a Motel 6 and, the Ritz Carlton. What it says is that the amount of improvement decreases the higher up you go. So, like, take a bottle of wine, right? I lived in Spain for 20 years. I drank a lot of wine. You get in Spain for 10 euros, you get a nice bottle of wine. Now, for 20 euros, okay, you get a Gran Reserva or a Reserva. It's been in the barrel for a few more years. It's a little more oaky, but it's the same grapes. It's the same process, but maybe the flavor is a little more complex. For 100 euros, there's no fucking difference. 1,500 euros, forget about it. It's all impressing people and labels and whatever. So it's not that there's no difference. There's a difference between a Motel 6 and a, Renaissance Inn or something. There's definitely a difference. But the difference gets smaller the higher up you go. So yeah, I've been on private jets. Was there a difference between the $10 million private jet and the $30 million private jet? Not that I noticed, you
You
know.
didn't have to go through security. That's all I'm saying. That's the part I hate about going to the airport.
There's that, and there are no middle seats.
Yeah, yeah. But I see what you're saying. Yeah, there's like a limit where it's like you have, like you said, if once you have $1 million, like you pretty much you have enough to like survive. You don't have to worry about money. You're gonna be able to eat, and I mean, unless the dollar crashes, of course. But I mean, you're probably gonna be able to live for the rest of your life and be okay and survive.
Yeah. There's a story a friend told me about Joseph Heller, the writer who wrote Catch 22, amazing book. He
Hmm.
was at a dinner at some billionaire's house and with a bunch of people and the billionaire got called away to some phone call he had to take. And so they were sitting there waiting for him and somebody said to Joseph Heller, does it occur to you that this guy makes more money in a week than you've made in your whole life? And Heller said, yeah, yeah, but I have something he'll never have. And I said, what's that? He said, enough. I think that's how much does it cost to have enough, right? When do you have enough? Like if you look at every relationship as like, yeah, I could probably find a better woman. I could probably find someone who's, a little taller, or a little this, or a little more that, or what. If you never stop yearning for more, then you'll never be happy. You'll never get there. You'll just always be swimming toward the next island, and you'll never be hanging out on the beach anywhere. Um, so I feel like addiction, we talk about being addicted to Adderall or addicted to meth, or what about addicted to success? What about addicted to money? We don't talk about those things because our culture values those things. But I think we should, because a lot more people are addicted to some amorphous concept of success than any drug I can think of.
Right. And for some people, I feel like it is just like they just love the game. They legitimately love that game. And I think like doesn't Warren Buffett, doesn't he give like he still lives in like a like kind of a junky old house and drives like a minivan or something? Like he doesn't really he's not really into like the spending, but he just really loves like playing the stock market or whatever. Like some people really love it, whereas some people they feel like it's never enough and they always have to get more. I feel like some of the rock stars I've interviewed kind of have that mentality where it's like they're still trying to prove themselves and it's like, dude, you've had massive success, like, and you're not, it's still not enough. They want that next hit, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a hamster wheel. And I mean, maybe I'm just like self-justifying or something, but I feel like true success is when you step off the wheel. That's
Or
when
true
you're
happiness,
successful.
at least, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Yeah. Happy. I mean, you can't be happy if you're always chasing something, right? If you're always chasing some transitory high, that's not happiness. Um, and people talk about, oh, marriage is a lot of work. If it's a lot of work, maybe you're married to the wrong person. You know, maybe things don't need to be so difficult. You don't, people write these books. I forget the name of the guy who's a Navy SEAL or something, wrote this book, Nothing Can Hurt Me. Like, dude, lots of things can hurt you.
David
Like,
Goggins?
yeah, yeah,
Oh, I love that book. I
yeah.
think he's inspirational, but I don't want to be David Goggins. But I could be like maybe 10 or 20% more David Goggins. I think that is good for me personally. But I don't want
Yeah.
to be to be that crazy where it's like he never takes a day off. Like I don't think that would be enjoyable.
From what I hear, he has trouble walking. And he's fucked up his body. You don't need to push that hard. That's my point. Whether it's about money, it's about, you know, ego, it's about power, it's about fame. You don't need to push that hard. And we idolize these people who go to the max. The max is like a mountaintop. Maybe you climb up there, but you don't live up there. Are you kidding? It sucks up there. There's no oxygen. It's fucking cold. The weather sucks. It's windy and snowy. Nobody wants to live on the mountaintop. Go up there, tell us how it was, but come back down and, hang out by the waterfall. There's no point in trying to live on a mountaintop.
No, that's so funny that you said that because that's how I feel. Like I'll go to the gym. I go to the gym 5 days a week, but I fucking hate it. I hate the gym, but I go there for my health. I feel better afterwards, obviously. But there's people that like, oh, I love the gym. I'm like, you're fucked up. Like, I don't know why you would like this. This is not fun to work out and lift weights, but yes, it feels good afterwards. I don't
Some
know.
people need it. This is the thing Rogan and I used to talk about a lot because he was like, if I don't work out,
Yeah,
I can't live with myself. I can't sleep. I can't calm. I'm just too agitated.
right.
Like, okay, if that's the way your
That's how
metabolism
I'm
is,
wired. Yeah.
okay, I'm not.
You're not, so
And
do you not work out at all or do you don't do any?
I go for walks. I like chop wood and I move shit around. I live on a way out in the country, so I have shit to do.
Okay. Well, yeah,
Um,
that's,
but like, no,
I love.
I don't like belong to a gym or anything like that.
Yeah, I love for me it's like the best thing is swimming. I swim 45 minutes a day and it's almost like a meditative thing. It's like the one time I take my phone off, like I'm just there with my thoughts in the sunshine and I'm here in Arizona. It's like I love it. It's like peaceful. It does really help my mental health. I feel like that's something that a lot of people are not aware of. But like mental health in America is like so off the charts. Like people are struggling. I feel like exercise is a big piece that's missing for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And swimming is a great exercise. There's no traumatic impact on your joints or anything like running and, basketball and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Yeah, I love swimming. I grew up swimming all the time.
Yeah, but so you don't have that. Like if you don't exercise it, like your head is fine. You don't start like having like anxiety and stuff and start getting you're just mellow kind of guy.
I'm pretty mellow. Yeah. No,
That's
I could
nice. I'm
I
jealous. I wish I had that kind. See, that's the thing, and I think there's people like David Goggins who it's like for whatever reason he needs to exercise that much or he's gonna like mentally go crazy.
yeah, no, I'm totally fucked by my happy childhood, you know. It just I don't have any drive really.
Well, you do. You wrote two. I wish I could have the drive to write two books and have a successful podcast and travel the world. I mean, you've done so many cool things. Like,
Yeah, but I everything I did except the second book um felt good while I was doing it. So it's not like, I got to buckle down and, be disciplined and, push this out. Um, everything I did was just like, this is exactly what I feel like doing, like traveling around the world. I loved it, man. There was nothing I would have rather been doing at the time. And, the study of sexuality and anthropology and all that stuff was just like, I'm fascinated by this stuff, I want to read this. And then when I had the opportunity to put it together into an argument that seemed that it could help people, that was like, awesome. Wow. I get to do this. This is fun, and anything having to do with sexuality is kind of self-propelled as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. It's interesting when I read your book, I'm kind of like, there's a part of me that's kind of like, why did you have to write this book? Like what, like you're just basically saying like, hey, some people don't want to be monogamous. And I'm like, well, yeah, like why do we need a book? But it's like, I guess you have to like prove your point to some people who say like, no, everyone needs to be monogamous. But to me, I'm kind of like, well, some people are monogamous and some people don't. And to me, I kind of think like, do whatever makes you happy. But be true to yourself. Because I think there's people that go both routes that are not being true to themselves, right? They think, oh, I need to be like a cool guy, like swinger guy, and like have sex with a bunch of chicks, but really they just need to settle down. And then there's people who settle down that should never have settled down.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are a lot of people who settle down and then decide they don't really want to be settled down, but they don't want to have those complicated conversations. So they just lie and, live a double life. And of course, that causes all sorts of issues as far as, getting back to happiness and authenticity and those sorts of principles.
Yeah, I'm always interested in relationships. Like when people talk about, tell me if they got divorced, I always ask like, well, like what happened? Like, why'd you get married in the first place? It seems like a lot of times they got married for the wrong reasons. Either it's because like they thought that's what society wanted them to do, or they're trying to please their parents, or they just thought this is what they're supposed, this is what we should do. Like, but they didn't. It was never like, oh, I really just love this person. I want to spend the rest of my life. You rarely hear that when people get divorced.
Mm, mm. Yeah, maybe it's painful to tell that kind of story if they're getting divorced.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, and then when talking about like the billionaires and stuff, like do you think that they are doing like those eyes wide shut like kind of parties and stuff? Like is that really a thing that's going on, and or is that maybe like something that people would strive for happiness?
Yeah, I have a friend who used to host those parties, play parties in major cities in the U.S. Very kind of exclusive, and um, some regular attendees at the parties were billionaires whose names you would know. And I was surprised. He told me about it, and I said, "Well, did everyone have to sign NDAs and all this stuff?" And he's like, "No, they didn't care. They were like, eh, no
Wow.
problem." Yeah, and they would show up like the whole sort of like upper echelon of this big company. They used to come to these parties with women who weren't their wives. And he talked to them about it, and they were like, yeah, no, it's all understood, in our marriages that it's cool for us to do this kind of stuff. And so no need for NDAs, no problem. And they weren't wearing masks or anything. It was, yeah. I
Wow.
think as far as sexuality goes, basically it's like taxes. The only people who really play by the rules are the middle. The very rich and the very poor do whatever they want. It's the middle that has to sort of maintain this facade of propriety. All the way back to the Victorians. We hear about the Victorians and how uptight they were and blah, blah, blah. But the upper classes, oh, they're having orgies, and, the men were banging their maids and, had concubines all over the place. And the very poor, they do whatever they want because they got nothing to lose. They got no reputation to worry about. So it's always the sort of middle that has to toe the line and pay their taxes and, be good citizens.
Well, yeah. So then talk about this, because this was one part of the book when I was reading Sex at Dawn. I was like, I think I like remembered this before, but maybe this was like fake news. And then you wrote about it in the book, and I was like, okay, good. This is like he actually wrote about this part because I remember this. where you talk about doctors in the. I thought it was the 1950s, but I think you in your book you said it was more like the 20s or the maybe even the 1800s, were female housewives. They would have this thing called hysteria, and they would go to the doctor, and the doctor would basically make them have an orgasm with using a vibrator. It was like a medical vibrator to cure the female hysteria of these middle class housewives.
Yeah, well, they did it manually for a long time before the vibrators were invented. And then, yeah, there is some controversy about this. After Sex at Dawn came out, the anthropologist who did the most of the research on this, I forget, The Technology of Orgasm was the name of her book. I forget the author's name. But some other anthropologists, probably 2012, 13, somewhere in there, came out with a paper critiquing her research and calling into question some of the things she had said about the early use of vibrators. But leaving that aside, there's no question that hysteria was, until the 1950s, a commonly diagnosed malady of women. And in the late 1800s and early 1900s, in the US and in England, doctors treated it with vulvar massage, was the term they would use, to provoke a nervous paroxysm, which is the other term they would use to avoid saying orgasm. And it was great because, basically they would masturbate women to orgasm, but everyone was pretending it wasn't sex. It was just a nervous release. And the women would feel better for a couple of weeks, and then they'd come back for another treatment. So
So weird to think about. Like, did the husbands know what was going on, or?
it's not sex if your doctor's doing it to you, right? I mean,
I mean, it's just
it's
such weird times that I don't know. Like, we live in. I feel like the pendulum has swung so far the other way now, because it's like now there's like everything's going on, but back then it was like you couldn't do anything. Like, there was no sex. Now it's like everything's out in the open. Like, everything's just right out here for you can do whatever the fuck you want almost. I mean, there's still people
yeah.
fighting and frowning upon things and whatever, but what do you think of, like, this is kind of a weird phenomenon that I don't know if this is something that was always happening and now it's shining a light on, but like there seems to be this new thing where in the last, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, I'd say, all these female teachers having sex with male students. What is, as a psychologist and someone who's written about sex, I don't think that you talked about that in the book. What is going on
Well,
there? Is that, I don't understand the attraction. If you're like, and these women, if you see the pictures, sometimes they're very beautiful women. They're like
yeah.
25, peak of their, beautifulness or whatever you'd call it. And they're going after like a 13, 14, 15-year-old boy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, I don't know that these cases are becoming more frequent or if it's just that they're coming to our attention, right? So that's always a question. When you start reading about
Right.
things in the paper, is it just that, because of cell phones or, whatever, it's become more sort of evident. As far as, what motivates women in that position, I can only guess, being a man, and although I did date a woman once in Spain who taught high school, and one time she told me she had this big dark secret and it was a big deal, and finally she confessed that she had slept with some of her students who were 15, 16 years old. And so I do have some very limited firsthand knowledge of this. And what she said was that, first of all, they wanted it so bad. Like they were just crazed with desire. And so that turned her on because in general, women like to be desired. And it also provoked a sense of compassion in her, that she was like, this poor kid, it would be so easy to make him so happy, you know? That's pretty much what motivated her. And you can say that's a good decision, a bad decision. I don't know. But I think that's probably a lot of it. It's being extremely desired because, who experiences desire like a 15-year-old boy? I don't know what you were like at 15, but I
Yeah.
was.
Well, I just wondered where these women were when I was 15. My teachers were like, it was like Mimi from Drew Carey show. Like those are the kind of teachers I had. I didn't have these like beautiful 25-year-old young female teachers. Like it's just, and see, it's just an interesting moral thing too. Cause it's like the way the media phrases it, they'll be like, it's almost like they say like the woman like raped the man. I'm like, is this sexist to say? I feel like there's a double standard. Like, it's different. I'm not saying what the teacher, female teacher is doing is right, but it's very different than a male teacher and a female student, is it not?
I think it is. But I'm out of alignment with American sexual morality.
Well, I know that's why I'm asking you. Yeah, I mean, you're
Yeah.
obviously more liberated, liberal, whatever the word is. And that's what's so interesting about your book. I just like hearing people's different perspectives. To me, your book wasn't like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it wasn't like really controversial, but some people felt it is.
Yeah, I think a lot of people feel it is, especially people who haven't read it. I get a lot of criticism from people who clearly think they know what the book's about, but haven't read it. And in general, they think it's a book that advocates non-monogamy. Um, Whereas there's no advocacy at all in the book other than be honest, be clear, be authentic, don't lie to your partner, don't lie to yourself. That's about as far as we went as far as advocacy goes. Um, but I think that we need to understand that humans are an extremely sexual species. So what Casilda and I, my co-author, what we were trying to do was present human sexuality in context, right? So in the context of human evolution, in the context of other primates, in the context of other mammals, right? Like, what kind of animal are we? And when you look at Homo sapiens from that perspective, what you see is that we're an extremely sexual species. I mentioned earlier, there are only a few mammals. Of the thousands of species of mammals, there are only a handful that have sex when the female is not ovulating, which is humans, chimps, bonobos, dolphins, and I think that's it, actually. Those four are the only, and three of them are primates, and there's dolphins. All of them are highly social, highly intelligent species for which sexuality has been co-opted from a purely reproductive purpose to a social maintenance mechanism. So, when you look at our species and you see that, and that's clear, that's incontrovertible. There's tons of evidence, and that's why you had to write a book, right? Because if you're saying something like that, you have to show the evidence. And once you see that, then you say, okay, we're a highly sexualized species. What does that mean for me personally? Well, it could mean anything for you personally, right? I often compare monogamy to vegetarianism, right? It's not something our species has done. We didn't evolve as vegetarians, but if you want to be a vegetarian, like, great, that could be really good for you. It could be good for your body. You can make a very strong argument that it's ethically superior to eating meat, especially when you're looking at factory raised, cruelty based agriculture. But just because you've decided to be a vegetarian doesn't make you an herbivore, right? You're still an omnivore. Your ancestors were omnivores. You're an omnivore who chooses not to eat meat. So you can choose to be celibate if you want, but it's not going to be easy because you are from a species that is sexually omnivorous.
Then what is going on with all the, and I don't know if this is, I mean, just my lifetime that I've seen, but I don't know if this is something that's more, it seems like it's gotten worse over the years, but maybe it's always been like this. There seems to be a lot of people who are basically asexual. I don't know how else to describe it. Like, I mean, they have no interest in having a boyfriend or girlfriend at all. It appears, unless they're going home secretly and then doing something, I don't know. But like, there's people I've known them for decades, and they've never had a girlfriend or they've never had a boyfriend, and they don't seem to have any interest in doing that. Is that something that's like something maybe going on with our food supply, or is it just like, how does that evolve? Because genetically, that wouldn't really make sense for evolution to have asexual people. This many, it seems like there's a lot.
Yeah, that's a complicated question. Um, and I can't give you a simple answer to it, but I think, yes, there are things in the food supply that are affecting hormone levels in males and females. There are clearly, as we established earlier, we live in a somewhat pathological society, and in the United States, we have a very negative attitude towards sexuality, even though we celebrate it and sell it and use it to sell everything. We're very puritanical, and there's a lot of conflict and shame around sexuality. So I can understand people opting out, especially when they have access to porn and, they can keep all their sexual behavior isolated and not have to deal with other humans. There are issues around autism or being on the Asperger's spectrum, discomfort dealing with other people. In Japan, there's a big issue with people who just don't want to have any contact with other human beings at all because they can have everything mitigated through a computer. Very sort of um, sterile interaction with the world. And then there's even evolutionary issues, right? If we live in a society in which these sorts of things are possible, some people are going to have that proclivity. And when populations reach a certain point, um, behavior that is not reproductive becomes favored for the species, if not for the individual. So, and this gets into a kind of complicated area of evolutionary theory where, why would someone, for example, why would young men risk their lives to save a woman? Well, one argument is, okay, if you risk your life, then you're brave, then more women are going to want to have sex with you. So it's actually beneficial. It's a risk, but it could be beneficial to you in terms of reproductive success. But a more complicated and subtle argument is that we have certain behaviors that are positive for the species or positive for our social group, if it's a hunter-gatherer band, for example, or a village somewhere, that even though I die and I won't have any children, the net effect will be beneficial to my social group. So the evolutionary pressure is actually on my group, not on each individual. It's called, I think it's, I forget the phrase, I think it's multi-level evolutionary theory, something like that. So there's evolutionary pressure on the individual, there's evolutionary pressure on the family unit, there's evolutionary pressure on the social unit, whether that be a village or a nation or a hunter-gatherer band or whatever. So this is one theory for why homosexuality appears to be more prevalent in the West. Some people argue that, well, homosexuality is a way for a species that's already reached a certain population density to lower its population density toward a healthier level. So it's like a birth control system.
Yeah. And then so on the other end of the spectrum, because then you've got like, I mean, this term that never was around when I was a kid, and I guess probably good because when I was, like you said, when you were 15, and like you probably had this toxic masculinity. Like it's weird to me. I mean, because I just don't understand that term. I think there's people who are assholes, definitely, but I don't know why it's a toxic masculinity. I mean, you can have a high level of testosterone and not be an asshole. So I don't know. Like, what do you think's going on there? Like, because I think high levels of testosterone is a great thing. I wouldn't see how that's a flaw.
Yeah, well, testosterone has a mixed reputation, right? I mean it's associated with violence and risk taking and certain negative things, but it's also associated with appetite for life and higher happiness. And um, although I really don't subscribe to the like this hormone does that or this neurotransmitter, the oxytocin is bonding and serotonin is happiness. Like that's everything's so much more complicated than that. But yeah, I think, that's more of a sociological question, I think, than a biological or evolutionary question. I think toxic masculinity is a cultural expression of something about, it's, I think we're in a moment where a lot of the sort of previously dominant social groups or social identities, actually more than social group, are being vilified. I just saw a thing that Neal Brennan was doing on his stand-up. He was talking about how funny it is to be a white heterosexual man right now because you're the enemy. Like I'm the enemy. And he was like, he went to the Women's March and he's like, it's a weird thing to be, in a march protesting against yourself,
Yeah, that's a
and
good
then he was
point.
like, and then the George Floyd thing happened, and I had to go to another march, and I took the same sign, which was, like down with white, hegemony or whatever.
Oh yeah, Neil Brennan's great. You had him on your podcast, right?
Yeah, yeah,
It's crazy. Yeah,
yeah.
that's a good point though.
That's a mystery to me. That Neal Brennan episode was really, really interesting. I was living in LA at the time, and I got a text from him. And I don't know Neal Brennan. I don't
You knew
know
who he
even
was
how.
though, right? Or
Well, I
no?
knew who he was,
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
but I didn't. I just seen Three Mics, his first special, which is one of my favorite comedy specials ever. But yeah, he texted me and he was like, "Hey, I love your podcast. If you ever want to have me on, I'd be down." And I was like, "Neal
Wow.
Brennan? Like, what the fuck? Like, why would Neal Brennan want to be on my podcast? Like." I've never had the audience numbers that would justify somebody like Neal Brennan wanting to be on my podcast. But I was like, fuck yeah. So he gave me his address. We set up a time. I went to his house and uh, it was strange, kind of awkward. He's kind of an awkward dude, and I could just tell like after an hour or whatever it was, I could just tell like he was done. Like, it was like, okay, now get the fuck out of my house. And so I wrapped it up but I was like, I had to pack up my mic and my cables and all my shit. And as I was doing that, I was feeling like he really wants me to get the fuck out of his house. Like whatever, capacity he has to have a stranger in his house, like we've passed the deadline. And which I get. I mean, that's part of his thing, that he's got this psychological, issues. And anyway, so I'm packing up my stuff and I said, Neal, weird question, man. But like, why did you do this? Like, there's nothing in this for you. Why did you do my podcast? And he just said, kindred spirits. And that was it. Then I shook his hand and I left and I never saw him again, never heard from him again.
Holy shit, that's a fucking awesome story though. Damn.
Yeah.
Yeah, that
Yeah.
is well, because I thought you were saying something like he had like 50,000 downloads, and I was like, that's a lot. But so you're saying he could do bigger things, or he didn't need
Oh,
to do your podcast. He just did it as
yeah.
a way to help you out.
No, no. And those guys, they're doing, he's a really well-known comedian. He co-created the Chappelle show.
Yeah.
He's got access to that whole podcast world.
Mhm.
Bill Burr and Mark Maron and Joe Rogan. And like he doesn't need me. I'm like fifth tier. As far as that stuff goes. So there was no professional benefit in him doing my podcast. I don't know. Maybe he read one of my books and liked it. oh, maybe he heard some episode and I said something about him that was nice. I don't know.
See, that's how I felt about you doing my podcast. So I was like, because I just typed in, I was like, I need to have some more psychologists on the show. So I type in psychologist, Joe Rogan. I was like, I bet Joe Rogan's probably had some good ones. And your name was the first name that came up, and you've done like 13 of his episodes. And I was like, well, I'll give it a shot. He probably won't want to do my little show. And then you said yes. And I was like, wow, okay. Because you're obviously doing me a favor more than I'm helping you out.
You've had some big people on your show. I forget who they were, but I looked at your previous guests and there were definitely people I recognized, interesting folks.
Right. But I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like you have a much bigger audience on your own show than I mean, I'll obviously you want to promote both your books and your podcast and any other projects that you have, but I mean, you're helping me out more than I'm helping you, I guess I would say.
Well, kindred spirits. What
Yeah,
can
there
I
we
say?
go. So yeah, I think that's cool. I mean, I agree. Like the more I learn about you, like that seems to be like a cool thing about just who you are is like, which I wish more of society was like that. They just want to help each other out. I was trying to help anybody out. I mean, and I have a small show, but if some smaller show says, "Hey, will you be a guest?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course." Like,
Well, that's the way it works, right? Like you never would have heard of me if Rogan hadn't had me on his show,
right.
and yeah. I mean, to me, it's not, I mean, I don't do a lot of podcasts because as I said earlier, like I'm busy doing my own and I'm writing, I got my Substack, I got all the shit to do, and I'm, doing construction and doing all sorts of stuff around the house here. Um, but to me, it's not about how big someone's audience is. It's about how their mind works and what their motivation is. And like I said, I don't remember what it was right now because it was a week or two ago when you reached out. But I watched a couple of your episodes and it was just like, oh, this guy like takes it seriously and he's asking good questions and he's engaging people and it's not like you got a list of questions written down and you're just like looking down at your page, like you're actually in a conversation as opposed to an interview, which is what I appreciate. I've done too many fucking interviews. It's like if you got the questions written down, email them to me and I'll get to
Right.
them. Like
Yeah.
if you actually want my time, like we need to like be together.
Exactly. No, that's what I appreciated about your episodes with Rogan. You guys just had such good chemistry and bounced off each other. I think that's what's so cool about podcasts is that it isn't like those old school interviews that you used to watch as a kid. Like, I mean, I like Howard Stern, but I felt like sometimes he's too like he'll interrupt the guest a lot and it's
Hmm.
not like a real natural conversation. I really appreciate about that's what I've learned from Rogan is just kind of, oh, maybe just sit back and listen sometimes, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, that takes practice. In my case, that was one of the things I noticed, back when I started out, I talked way too much, and I would notice when I was editing the episodes because you could see the waveforms on the two tracks. And it was like, God damn, look, oh, there's too much like too much audio on my track there. So, but I wanted it to be conversational. I didn't want it to just be like, so tell me about your childhood. And then I'd sit back and, look at my watch for 10 minutes. I had that happen once. It's the worst interview ever. And it was for the back page of this big newspaper in Spain and the Vanguardia, it's called. And they always did on the back page, they have a profile of some writer, some scientist, whatever. They'd have a big photo and then there'd be this interview. And so it was a big moment for me when Sex at Dawn came out. It was published in Spain, and they asked me to do this. And I was like, fuck yeah, I'm going to be on the back page of La Vanguardia. This is awesome. So I go down to the offices, and they take me into this conference room, and I'm sitting there, and I'm waiting like 15 minutes, and nobody comes. Finally, this woman comes in, and you can tell she fucking hates me. Like she just doesn't like somebody's making her do this, I think.
Mm.
Some boss was like, no, get an interview with this guy, this book, whatever. She comes in, sits down, looks at me like I'm a piece of shit, puts her tape recorder on, presses the button, and says, okay, tell me about your book. And then she proceeds to look at her phone. She sits there looking at her
That's
phone, checking her emails. And I'm like, I'm just talking like I'm alone talking about my book, and she just, yeah,
Wow.
is horrible.
So
Yeah.
yeah, because like I think you said before that you thought like when the Sex at Dawn came out, you thought it was going to be more of these like religious kind of far right people that would criticize it, but a lot of it was actually more like these kind of like feminists and the toxic masculinity kind of, right? I mean, isn't that a lot of the criticism of the book?
Yeah, I mean, there were some situations that happened that were um people, like I said, a lot of the people who have sort of, you know, very negative opinions of the book haven't read it, and they think that it's saying it's okay to cheat on your partner. It's okay. It's natural. Everybody should lie and cheat. And, of course, that's not at all what we said, but that's what some people think it says, because all they've heard is the blurb, oh, it's a book that says monogamy is not natural. So then they fill in the rest, that it's therefore not good. Therefore, anyone who cheats is, just being their natural self and is without blame. And so several different situations, like a couple of publishers, a couple of potential documentary distributors, like people in positions of power explicitly said, I'm not going to promote a book that supports cheating. And it was like, okay, because her husband left her, or, she had some negative experience with some fucking Harvey Weinstein idiot, and she thought that this book was justifying that kind of behavior. So we've run into that a few times in some pivotal moments. There was a very powerful woman at HBO, and three different producers pitched her a Sex at Dawn documentary, and all three, she just said, "Get out of my fucking office. I don't want to hear about that book anymore." And it was, and then it got back
Wow.
to us that her husband had cheated on her and she'd
Oh.
gone through this horrible divorce. And so she was just like, I'm not going to do anything to help that kind of book.
Right.
So,
Well, isn't it more? I mean, the book isn't really about that. It's more just like being open and honest, like you said earlier, being open and honest with yourself and being able to have those conversations. Like, if a guy is attracted to another girl, sharing that with his wife or whatever, or maybe not being in a monogamous relationship, then if that's like kind of having these conversations maybe before you get into the relationship.
right. Ideally, you have them very early on, along with the conversations about, do you want to have kids or not? And, what are those sort of deep, essential, uh, questions about what kind of life you want to live. I think monogamy is one of those conversations that should definitely be included.
Yeah. So then what do you think about like, what do you call it? Like Mormon or Latter-day Saints? I think they preferred LDS, like those marriages where the guy has like multiple wives. Cause I think it's technically illegal, but obviously they just do it anyways. Like, so is that, so, I mean, does it, if it works for all those people, if they're all on board with it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't have any moral certainty around these issues. So I kind of come down on the, consenting parties can do whatever they want. I think it does get complicated when children are involved, and then children are being raised in a society that says this is wrong, and yet that's, their personal world is in conflict with the broader society. I think those are complicated issues, but it's also complicated if you are honest with your kids and tell them there's no Santa Claus, and then they have to go to school and, keep their mouths shut, so they don't ruin everyone else's illusion. So I don't really know. That's one of the reasons I don't have kids. I don't want to get into that situation where my sense of what's right and wrong is in conflict with the society sense of what's right and wrong, and my kid's stuck in the middle.
Right. Well, I think that's one of the biggest mistakes. I used to work in the schools. I was a school counselor for like 17 years. And I mean, I felt like a lot of the kids I worked with, were missing either one or both parents. And I felt like maybe the people shouldn't have had a kid in the first place. Like they didn't really want this kid. Now they are dealing with it. And so the kid just feels like he's not wanted, and then he's going to have a lot of issues, and it's really sad to see. So like, I think that's a healthier decision to go, I don't really want kids, and then you don't have kids.
Yeah. Yeah. And as far as the mental health of children, it's pretty clear that the more loving adults kids have around them, the healthier and happier they grow up to be. So again, I think a lot of I feel like a lot of modern society, a lot of the things we're trying to work out are things that our ancestors had. Children were raised by It Takes a Village, right? Children were raised by the band. In many societies, as we outlined in Sex at Dawn, people don't even know who their biological father is, and they don't really care. It doesn't matter, because all the men take care of the kids and all the women take care of the kids. Everybody takes care of the kids. So it's not like, your father has a special responsibility biologically, your biological father. And then some societies believe that a child can have several fathers. If several different men have sex with that woman, they think that they're all the father of her child. So yeah, it's a very muddled picture in terms of parenting and hunter-gatherer societies.
Yeah. So how do you think that like our society, do you think we're getting kind of, maybe it seems like there is kind of a little bit of a revolution going on. I wouldn't even call it political, but it just seems like people are trying to kind of get back to more basic things like, eating whole foods, organic foods, and farm foods, and being more self-sufficient, doing more things on their own, and not being as reliant on the big machine of society.
Yeah, well, as I outlined in Civilized to Death, I feel like we are at this historical moment where we're kind of turning back toward home. I
Yeah,
hope that's what's
I hope
happening.
so too. Yeah.
And yeah, I live in this tiny little town in Colorado because I wanted to live in a town where everyone knows each other and where neighbors help each other and where the sky is dark at night and you can see the stars and you can drink the water from the stream running down from the mountains and, like a lot of the elements of sort of basic human existence are still accessible. And I think a lot of people feel that way. And I think, people are finding ways to create their own communities and take care of each other. And then there's all the commercialized stuff as well, the ayahuasca ceremonies and the, paleo nutrition and paleo movement and, paleo sexuality and, paleo everything. People are looking toward the distant past for answers as to what makes life worth living. And I think that's a good place to look.
Yeah, a lot of those more basic things, I think. I mean, I'm not a vegetarian. I'm more into eating whole foods, but especially meats. But yeah, tell me, so have you done ayahuasca? I've heard things. I follow this one podcast. The guy, he seems like kind of a straight arrow kind of guy, but he raves about ayahuasca and says that he doesn't drink anything, but he loves doing ayahuasca sometimes. He said it really helps him see like outside of himself.
Lex Friedman.
No, this guy's name is Rob Dial. He hosts a
Yeah.
podcast called The Mindset Mentor. It's like one of the, I don't really listen to as much anymore. I feel like I've kind of like, it's kind of a very more basic podcast when you first start wanting to like work on yourself or do self development. I recommend it, but then I feel like I've kind of like it's almost like too basic for me now. Like I want to like
Mm.
more complicated things like Lex Friedman or something.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done ayahuasca a few times. I've done psychedelics many times, mushrooms and LSD primarily. Not recently. It was something I did a lot in my 20s. But ayahuasca can be uh, fascinating. Yeah. I'm hesitant to recommend anything because, people are listening to this that we don't know.
Right.
And it very much depends on where you are in your life and how stable your psyche is and how much stress you're under and also what the setting is that you're doing it. There's a place in Costa Rica which is very good and very careful and does a lot of screening and preparation and um, uh, Tamara, it's called.
Hmm.
But then there are other people who just, get some ayahuasca and rent a Motel 6 room and charge a bunch of money and good
Shit.
luck to you,
Because you can
It's,
have some side effects, right? Is there a negative thing that can happen? I mean, it wouldn't be, I'm hoping it wouldn't be permanent, but
well, any psychedelic can exacerbate pre-existing psychological condition. So if someone is having, psychotic episode and they take psychedelics, it's probably going to make it a lot worse. Anything where your sort of grasp on consensus reality is not strong, you want to avoid psychedelics because, psychedelics are kind of can be like an earthquake. It shakes things up. And if your structure is sound, then okay, you'll be fine. It'll just give you this different perspective on things. But if there's a crack in the foundation and you get a little 4.5 earthquake, that can bring down the whole house. So that's why I say it's really important where someone is in their life. If, they're grieving, the death of a parent or a good friend, or, they're going through a lot of sadness, maybe that's not the time to do this, Maybe it is if you've got a lot of support and you really want to, turbocharge your grieving process, maybe it is, but it's not. I spoke at a psychedelic conference recently in Las Vegas, which is just the concept of psychedelics in Las Vegas is already a mind fuck. But
yeah.
and it was one of these things where there were all these people there with their, microdose protocols and they're this and they're that, and everybody's got a business and they're trying to monetize everything. And I just felt like I need to be the voice of, I need to be the turd in the punch bowl here, because like it's not a fucking magic pill. It doesn't give you instant wisdom. You're not going to become a fucking shaman because you've eaten some mushrooms in Peru. It the American approach to things, the whole sort of package it, market it, sell it, that whole approach to things is antithetical to the experience that's available from psychedelics. And so there's a strange bedfellows situation happening right now in America with psychedelics, and I'm not really sure how to wrap my head around it. But at this point, when I was in my 20s, I was telling everybody how great psychedelics are, and now in my 60s, I feel more like I want to warn people to be careful and, you know, approach. I look at psychedelics as a teacher that you approach with respect and honor, and not, you don't call them up in the middle of the night and say, "Hey, dude, let's party." That's not what it is. It's
Right.
something you approach with preparation and seriousness and intention and dignity. And like that's the kind of mentality that's going to lead you to have an amazing transformative experience. It's not, Burning Man.
Right. So for your personal experience, what did you, if you feel comfortable sharing, like, is there something that a revelation that you came to after trying these or is it always the same thing or is it different every time?
Um, yeah, it's like, it's very difficult to put into words, obviously. It's kind of like describing a dream or something, but I think if I had to sum it up, I would say that what I learned from psychedelics is that there's far more happening than we are perceiving, right? Like right now, there's, if I stop and listen, I hear a dog or a coyote barking in the distance. There's the fan of my computer running. There might be an airplane flying over, there's a fly buzzing in the window. There are all these things happening that 30 seconds ago I was totally unaware of, because the nature of consciousness is to shut everything out except the thing that you're trying to pay attention to, because it's just too much, right? To be aware of everything all at once. And what it feels like for me to take psychedelics is like those filters come away, and you sort of have this accentuated capacity to perceive. And so you perceive, wow, all this stuff at once. And it doesn't last. But when it goes back to normal, you remember that what it was like. So, I've been in situations, for example, there's a beautiful book called Pilgrim at Tinker Creek by Annie Dillard, where she describes this. She's not talking about psychedelics, but she goes to this creek and she sits there and she just doesn't move. And suddenly she starts seeing all these things, this little frog in the water that she hadn't noticed, and these dragonflies come by and she notices what they're doing. There's some kind of mating thing going on with them. And she starts picking up smells. And so the longer she just sits there and sort of opens the doors of perception, the more comes in. And so you realize that our perception of reality is mitigated by us, by our capacity to perceive, not by what's actually happening. I mean, that sounds like kind of an abstract insight, but I think it's a huge insight, because it leads you to always doubt your own perception, and to always understand that your perception of the world is framed by your own limitations. It's like you look at the world through a window, but your face is so close to the window, you don't realize there's a window there. And then you have an experience like with psychedelics, and it's kind of like you step back and you go, oh, I see. I'm looking at the world through this window, and now I can see the window. So now I incorporate the window into my understanding of what I'm seeing. I don't know if that translates,
No,
but
yeah, that totally does. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a little bit, it's kind of like mindfulness, but then also kind of like what I said earlier with the podcast that guy that I listened to, he said it was like he kind of was able to step outside of himself and just see things from a different perspective, which I think is so, and I think, is that why it also sometimes works with addicts so well? Because they're just so into this, like, oh, I need my heroin, I need my heroin. And then when they take a psychedelic, it's like they're able to step out and see it from a different perspective. Like they're just so stuck, or like if it was even grief, they're just so stuck in that grief, like they're addicted to the grief and they can't think of a different way. So that you're saying it can kind of pull you out of like something that you're stuck in.
yeah, I think it definitely can. And some are better at that than others. Ibogaine is extremely effective in helping people break addictions. That's an African psychedelic from the iboga plant. And there are some clinics around the world, not in the United States, but in Central and South America. There's some clinics that use ibogaine. Yeah, and it's more effective than any other treatment for heroin and alcohol and tobacco addiction. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. My dad, he wrote this book. You might actually like it. It's called Ultimate Reality, and it's all about, it's kind of like what you're talking about, but he has all these references and stuff. But it's just funny because, I grew up and he was very like anti-drug and all this. Well, like recently he fell off a ladder and he had a concussion, and they put him on these like pharmaceutical drugs, and it was giving him all these side effects. He had to like walk with a cane for a while, and like it was like really scary. We're like really worried about him. So then he did this research and he's like, oh, you know what? I found out that like NHL players, when they get a concussion, they take psilocybin mushrooms, and this helps them. It helps them heal the concussion. So he started microdosing mushrooms. My dad, it was just so weird to me. And he raves about it. He tells everyone about how great it is and how it helped him. And he said his experience, I mean, besides it totally healed his concussion, the doctors were baffled. There was like no record of it. They'd never seen anything like that. But besides that, he says like the microdosing, he said it really helps him. And I guess he's taking more than microdosing. He takes like a whole chocolate bar, which is like crazy, I guess. But he said it just makes him feel love and gratitude. It makes him really feel a lot of gratitude, which is a great thing, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. The book's called Ultimate Reality.
Ultimate Reality. Yeah. It's really interesting. It's all about, not necessarily, because I know there's like a book, I haven't read this one, that, Proof of Heaven. He's not necessarily, it's not like a religious thing, I don't think. I mean, that's what I asked him about, like, what does this all mean? He's like, well, basically, like, there is another reality. He's like, I don't know, I can't tell you like it's this or it's that. It's just like, there is proof that there is something else after we die. There is it's kind of what you're saying, like, we're seeing different things, like there is another reality that we only get a piece of it, like through psychedelics or through dreams or through near-death experience is a big part of what he talks about in the book. And so we're seeing pieces of this. And so there is something there, because there's other people that believe, you die and you're in the dirt and that's it. And so according to his book with like 500 references, there's something more. We don't know every detail about it, exactly what it is, but there's something.
Yeah. I'd like to check that out. Hey, I'm starting to lose my voice.
Yeah. Oh, no, I appreciate it. You did more than enough. I appreciate it. I will get this out soon. Anything else to promote besides your 2 books and your podcast? Is there anything else that you're currently working on that's going to be out soon?
No, I have a Substack page. That's where I write whatever I'm doing at the moment.
Okay, great. I'll put it all in the show notes. And thank you again so much for doing this. Kindred spirits. I appreciate it.
For sure. Good luck with the show.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Bye-bye.